This bakery sits high in the mountains outside Kyoto, where clear air and cool springs shape both the bread and the life of its baker. Before any bread can be made, fuel is prepared. The young baker chops firewood by hand for the traditional stone oven. Instead of relying on commercial flour, the baker mills wheat himself with an electric stone mill. Milling just before use preserves the germ and bran oils, giving bread a fuller taste and higher nutrition. Each grind is adjusted depending on the bread planned for the day. Now the dough is prepared. Into a wide cedar tub he measures freshly milled whole wheat flour, sea salt harvested from Kyotongo on the northern coast, his homemade fermented starter, and warm water warmed just enough to awaken the yeast. The cedar tub is deliberate. It helps regulate temperature and humidity, absorbing excess moisture and giving stability to the dough. This batch is destined to become Campaign Bio, a rustic country bread made from only 4 ingredients. He kneads entirely by hand, pressing and folding until the sticky mass begins to change texture. What starts as loose and rough gradually becomes elastic, the gluten network forming under his palms. He feels the resistance, the tension, and the precise moment when the dough is ready to rest. In Japan, many artisan bakers hold on to this traditional method, seeing it as a way of listening to the dough rather than forcing it. Next comes the dough for brioche paysanne, or farmer's brioche. Unlike the sweeter, cake-like French brioche, this rustic version blends finely milled white flour with whole wheat flour, giving it both softness and a nutty depth. A small amount of sugar is added to feed the yeast and balance flavor, along with salt, his natural starter, and rich Jersey cow's milk, prized in Japan for its high butterfat content. The mixture is heavy, but he kneads entirely by hand, pressing and folding until the dough gradually smooths out. This process helps the milk fat and proteins bind into the structure, creating a dough that is nourishing, not overly sweet. A true farmhouse bread. The brioche paysanne dough is now enriched with fermented butter. Unlike standard butter, fermented butter is cultured with lactic bacteria before churning, giving it a complex aroma similar to cheese and a slightly tangy depth that ordinary butter lacks. In traditional French country baking, this butter was often made on farms, where cream naturally soured before being churned. The baker doesn't laminate the dough like puff pastry. Instead, he folds in a few deliberate layers of butter, just enough to create pockets of richness that soften the crumb. This controlled folding allows the bread to remain hearty and rustic, while still carrying a buttery tenderness. Too many layers would produce a croissant-like flakiness, which isn't the goal here. Once folded, the dough is rested. During this stage, the butter solidifies again, the gluten relaxes, and fermentation continues quietly, deepening the flavor and improving digestibility. By combining whole flours with cultured butter and long fermentation, brioche paysanne reflects both luxury and tradition. A bread once made by farmers with whatever ingredients they had, elevated by careful technique. As the day ends, the last preparations are made. Each dough rests overnight, slowly fermenting, so that flavor deepens while the bakery sleeps. A new day begins with segure li, a dough prepared from brown rice flour blended with rye. While the dough rests, the baker turns to the wood-fired oven. It isn't lit quickly. The fire must be built gradually, feeding in logs until the thick stone walls absorb enough heat to bake steadily throughout the day. This slow heating process can take hours, but it's what gives the bread its characteristic crust and deep flavor. Now, the brioche paysanne returns to the bench. The large mass of dough is divided into equal portions, weighed and cut with precision. Each piece is gently rounded into smooth balls, a process that tucks the seams underneath and creates surface tension. This shaping is more than aesthetic. It ensures the loaves will rise evenly in the oven. Once shaped, the dough is left to rest on the board. During this pause, fermentation continues and the gluten network relaxes. If baked too soon, the crumb would be tight and heavy. But with the right rest, the result is a soft, tender brioche with a balanced structure. Every step, from division to resting, is about guiding the dough toward lightness while keeping its rustic character. For the campaign bio, dough pieces are shaped and placed in small wooden baskets. The baskets are floured generously so the dough doesn't stick. These baskets also guide the shape, ensuring a round loaf that holds during its final rise. Now the same dough is transformed into a different form. Oval loaves of campaign bio. At first glance, it may seem like just a change of shape, but the geometry matters. An oval exposes more surface area to heat in the oven, which means the crust develops differently. A touch firmer, with more variation between the edges and the center. Inside, the crumb becomes slightly more open near the middle, giving each slice its own balance of chew and airiness. The shaping itself is slow and deliberate. Each piece is stretched and folded carefully, the baker using just enough pressure to guide the dough without deflating it. Too much handling would destroy the fragile gas pockets built up during hours of fermentation. The goal is tension without compression, so the dough can spring upward once it hits the heat of the oven. Once the ovals are formed, they are dusted generously with flour and placed aside to rest in baskets. This final fermentation, known as proofing, allows the yeast to finish its work and ensures the bread will bake with depth of flavor and a crust that crackles. By the time they are ready for the oven, these oval loaves carry the same ingredients as the round ones, but their structure, crust, and even their eating experience will be subtly distinct. A short break in the day. The baker slices into one of the oval loaves, then slides the pieces back into the oven until they turn dry and crisp, becoming rusks. With a simple cup of tea, he takes a moment to eat in silence. Just bread, roasted twice. A small ritual of tasting, and a pause before returning to the labor of the bake. Back to work. The first round of campaign loaves is ready for the oven. Each is slid directly onto the stone floor, where the stored heat from hours of wood firing radiates upward. Baking takes around 30 to 40 minutes, but in a wood-fired oven, time alone isn't enough. The baker must constantly watch, color, and shape, shifting loaves to avoid hot spots, turning them so crust develops evenly on all sides. The fire gives these breads their character, a slightly smoky edge, and a firm, rustic crust that an electric oven could never replicate. Next, the oval campaign loaves are placed into the oven. Because of their length, the baker must position them with precision. Too close to the fire on one end would darken before the other. Too far back, and they risk baking unevenly. He uses his wooden peel not only to slide them in, but also to adjust angles during baking. The oval form creates more exposed crust than round loaves, so these breads develop a firmer bite and a slightly deeper flavor, prized by customers who prefer a heartier texture. Now it's time for Saguret Lee. This dough looks very different from the others, far wetter, almost like a thick batter rather than a firm bread dough. Because of its high hydration, it can't be shaped by hand. Instead, the baker pours it directly into pound cake molds, which act both as proofing baskets and as baking pans. Inside, the mix of brown rice flour and rye ferments slowly, developing a deep, earthy aroma. These grades are harder to work with than wheat. Rye has less gluten and rice has none at all. But together they create a moist, dense crumb with a flavor that lingers. Once baked, this bread keeps longer than softer loaves, a trait valued in rural households where bread was made only a few times a week. Just a quick break, no more. The pace of this work allows only the briefest pause before the fire and dough demand attention again. The oval campaign loaves are pulled from the oven, their surfaces golden and deeply blistered. The crusts split open in uneven lines, a natural pattern formed by steam escaping from within. Bakers see these cracks as proof of proper fermentation. The dough had the right strength to expand, and the oven's heat gave it the final push. Beneath the crust, the crumb will be open and moist, carrying the aroma of whole wheat and wood fire. Another round of dough goes into the oven. The work is heavy, lifting large wooden paddles, moving dozens of loaves. Bread making here demands not just skill, but stamina. A limited edition bread is also prepared, made with local wheat and flavored with dill seeds. Dill isn't common in bread making here, so this small batch stands out with its aromatic, slightly sharp flavor. It's baked only occasionally, a seasonal variation alongside the main loaves. More loaves come out of the oven, each one adding to the growing stacks. The air is thick with the scent of roasted grain, mingling with wood smoke, the unmistakable fragrance of bread baked in a traditional oven. Each finished loaf is brushed carefully to remove excess flour. Even this small act shows care for the bread and respect for the customer. Now, the limited seasonal bread is placed into the oven. This batch is made with grains milled especially for the season, combined with a small amount of fermented butter for richness. It's baked only a few times a year, so regulars wait for it and often reserve loaves in advance. Unlike the daily breads, this one has a deeper crust and a more complex flavor, making it one of the most anticipated offerings of the bakery. The limited bread emerges from the oven, its crust marked with a striking, irregular pattern formed by the folds and tension of the dough. These natural splits are prized by bakers, a sign of strong fermentation and careful shaping. No two loaves are identical. Each one carries its own character, shaped by heat, timing, and the baker's hand. Next is Grand Epote, spelt bread. Spelt is one of the oldest cultivated grains, grown for thousands of years before modern wheat. It has a fragile gluten structure, which makes the dough less elastic and harder to shape, but in skilled hands it produces loaves with a distinctive character, nutty, slightly sweet, and deeply aromatic. The result is a bread that feels both rustic, rooted in history, and refined enough for today's tables. Now the Sigur Etli loaves are ready. Baked firm inside their molds, they hold a dense, almost cake-like shape. The blend of rye and brown rice flour gives them a deep, earthy aroma and a slightly tangy taste. A bread with real weight and character, very different from the lighter wheat loaves. With the day's breads ready, the first customers arrive. There's no storefront here, only a small wooden window where loaves are passed directly from baker to buyer. It feels personal, almost old-fashioned. But that's the point. People come early, knowing the breads sell out quickly. Each loaf is still warm, carrying the smell of wood smoke and grain, and regulars often choose their favorites by eye. This simple exchange, bread for hand, is at the heart of the bakery's connection to its community. Beyond the customers at the window, the bakery supplies its bread to nearby shops and cafes. Deliveries are made daily, sometimes by the baker himself, ensuring that even those who can't travel up the mountain can still enjoy the loaves. In this community, the bread is more than a treat. It's part of daily life, baked locally and shared widely. And so the cycle continues. If you're ever in Kyoto, it's worth the journey up the mountain to taste bread born from fire, grain, and patience. 20 tons. That's how much fried chicken this shop sells every month. Not in a year, in a single month. To meet that demand, the process has to be scaled up massively. To keep up with demand, the kitchen relies on entire rows of heavy-duty deep fryers, each one built to run for hours without pause. Workers pour in jug after jug of fresh oil, filling dozens of vats until they shimmer with heat. At this scale, oil isn't just an ingredient. It's a resource that has to be monitored, filtered, and replaced constantly. As the oil heats up, the real secret of Korean fried chicken begins to take shape: the sauce. What makes it different from any other fried chicken isn't just the crunch, but the glossy glaze that locks onto every crisp edge. It starts with whole garlic cloves, gently sautéed until golden and fragrant. Bananas are pureed together with syrup. The fruit brings natural sugars and starch, which help the glaze thicken and cling once it hits the hot chicken. This puree is blended into a base sweet and sour sauce, layering fruitiness over tang. Next comes the garlic prepared earlier, crushed into a paste so it dissolves completely, giving depth without chunks. This slow step lays the foundation for a sauce that's equal parts savory, sweet, and sticky. The flavor that has made Korean fried chicken iconic around the world. More syrup is added, not just for sweetness, but to create a lacquered finish that shines on the surface. Korean fried chicken sauces are carefully balanced this way, sweet against savory, and why the sauce itself has become almost as famous as the chicken it covers. Next comes rice, but not the fluffy side dish you'd expect. Large sacks of short, round brown rice are cooked in ordinary rice cookers, just as they would be at home. These rice crisps serve two roles. They can be broken apart and eaten as a light snack, but more importantly, they're placed inside every fried chicken box. As the hot chicken steams, the rice sheet absorbs the excess moisture, keeping the crust intact far longer than paper liners or vented packaging could. It's an edible solution that highlights how central rice is in Korean food culture. Even here, it's not just accompaniment, but part of the technique that makes the fried chicken travel so well. Once ready, the grains are scooped onto a wide, flat grill. A heavy metal press comes down, fusing the rice into ultra-thin sheets while driving out moisture. Slowly, the grains harden into crisp, golden pancakes. Now the batter is prepared. Flour, water, and spicy seasoning are whisked into a light but flavorful coating. Each piece of chicken is dipped in the batter, then dredged in flour a second time, a technique that creates the ultra-thin, shatter-crisp crust Korean fried chicken is famous for. This double coating isn't random. It's been perfected since the 1970s, when American-style fried chicken first spread in Korea after the war. Korean cooks adapted the method, using smaller birds with thinner skin, seasoning the batter more aggressively, and introducing the hallmark second fry. The result was lighter, crunchier, and stayed crisp even under sauce, the opposite of the heavy, breaded versions common elsewhere. Today, this technique is standard across the country, so much so that many consider Korean fried chicken less a variation and more its own category of cooking, with dedicated chains and specialized family shops across every city. Flour and starch coating, a method perfected to guarantee an ultra-crispy crust. Starch, often potato or corn, adds extra crunch and keeps the coating dry, so it won't soften quickly. The first fry begins. Chicken is lowered into bubbling oil, turned and shifted constantly with long chopsticks, so each piece cooks evenly and develops a delicate shell. After several minutes, it's lifted out and rested. But this is only half the process. Korean fried chicken is defined by the double fry. Just before serving, the chicken is plunged back into hotter oil for a shorter, sharper fry. This second stage drives out hidden moisture and transforms the crust into something paper-thin and almost glass-like in its crispness. Even once it's coated in sticky sauce, that shatter crunch remains. Without this kind of preparation and control, there would be no way to keep up with the 20 tons of chicken that leave this kitchen every single month. It's time for the step that defines Korean fried chicken, the sauce. The glaze is reheated until it bubbles and thickens, caramelizing the sugars so it clings tightly. Each batch of chicken is tossed while still hot, ensuring the coating bonds instantly to the crust. What makes this remarkable is the balance. Enough sauce to saturate the flavor, but not so much that the crispness is lost. In many shops, there are two main versions: Yangnyeom chicken, glazed with this sweet, garlicky, spicy sauce, and Ganjang chicken, coated in a soy-based glaze with sesame for a deeper, savory profile. Both rely on the same principle: ultra-crisp skin that doesn't collapse under liquid. That combination of shattering crunch and sticky, layered flavor is why Korean fried chicken has become a global phenomenon, eaten late at night with soda or shared at family tables. Then come the massive takeout boxes, packed layer by layer with freshly fried chicken. Each box holds dozens of pieces, sealed not only for transport, but for consistency. On top, workers place crisp rice pancakes, those thin, brown rice sheets pressed earlier. They serve a double purpose, acting as a natural moisture absorber so the crust doesn't soften, and offering customers an extra snack that's crunchy and nutty on its own. This technique is one of the reasons large shops like this can move literally tons of chicken every month without sacrificing texture or quality, even after the food leaves the fryer. The second style sold here is all about speed and convenience. Instead of large pieces, the chicken is cut into small, bite-sized chunks. They're dipped in a quick batter and fried immediately, served in single-portion cups. These cups have become incredibly popular across Korea, especially with students and young workers who want something filling but portable. You can carry them in one hand while walking to class, riding the subway, or just snacking with friends outside. It's a very different experience from sitting down with a big box at home. This version is fast, cheap, and casual, closer to street food than a family meal. In fact, cup chicken has become a late-night staple around universities, where small shops serve endless batches to crowds looking for something crispy and satisfying before heading home. It shows how Korean fried chicken adapts. The same recipe, but tailored to fit the rhythm of everyday life. Now the small chicken pieces are filled into the cups, and here again we see the rice pancakes, cracked into smaller shards and tucked in alongside the chicken. They serve the same purpose as in the big boxes, soaking up steam so the chicken stays crisp, but here they also double as a crunchy snack you can eat together with the meat. This style of serving is designed for speed. Customers grab a cup, a skewer or toothpick, and they can eat on the move without needing a table. It's become a signature of Korean street food culture, especially around universities and busy markets. For students, workers, and late-night snackers, these cups are cheap, filling, and portable. In some neighborhoods, whole streets are lined with shops selling variations of cup chicken, each with their own spice blends or sauce twists. It's fried chicken scaled down to a street snack, quick, clever, and just as addictive as the full-size version. So, did it make you hungry? Korean fried chicken is more than just a late-night snack. In Korea, it's tied to social life, shared with beer during chimek nights, ordered for family gatherings, or eaten straight from cups on the street. What started as a local twist on fried chicken in the 1970s has now grown into an export loved around the world, from New York to Tokyo. Every crisp bite carries decades of refinement, from the double frying technique to the sticky sauces. Would you try it? 5,000 kilograms of plav. Enough to feed thousands. Cooked in pots the size of swimming pools. And here, in this Uzbek restaurant, it isn't a special event. It's daily business. A place cooking at this scale isn't just a restaurant. It's a center. A landmark where tradition meets spectacle. And people gather not only for the food, but for the chance to witness it being made. The process begins with fire, a real open flame beneath iron pots as wide as banquet tables. The wood has to be arranged carefully, fed slowly so the heat rises evenly. Into this heat, they pour liters upon liters of oil, enough to coat every grain of rice that will come later. The sound alone tells you how hot it is. A sharp hiss with every splash. Then the meat arrives, carried in buckets that look almost too heavy for one man to lift. These aren't small cubes or slices, they're enormous cuts, thick with fat and bone. At this scale, smaller pieces would simply disappear, dissolving under the weight of the rice and vegetables. By keeping the meat whole, it holds its flavor through hours of cooking, and later can be portioned generously onto each plate. The cooks arrange the meat carefully around the rim of the cauldron, almost like setting a stage. They watch the oil, listen to the crackle, waiting for the exact moment. And when it comes, there's no hesitation. With one swift move, the perimeter of meat slides into the boiling oil all at once, a technique passed down through generations, rehearsed until it looks effortless. It's dangerous, it's hot, and it's precise. But without it, you wouldn't get plav on this scale. Next, the vegetables arrive. And they're not measured in handfuls, but in buckets. Yellow carrots come first, cut thick, almost like fries. This variety is traditional in Central Asian plav, firmer than the orange carrots we're used to, and able to hold its shape during the long cooking. Then come the onions, mountains of them, sliced in bulk. Onions are the backbone of plav. They provide the sweetness, the depth, the base flavor that ties everything together. Salt is prepared not by the pinch, but on great metal trays. At this scale, seasoning has to be calculated with care, because 5,000 kilos of food can't be corrected later. The oil begins to shimmer. That's the signal it's ready. The cook takes a long wooden paddle and brushes the hot oil up along the walls of the kazan. Coating the sides helps the meat slide cleanly into the center without tearing or sticking. Around the rim, massive cuts of meat wait. Smaller pieces would fall apart in this kind of heat, so only large, solid chunks are used. He moves carefully along the edge, nudging each cut in. They slip down into the oil one after another, releasing a hiss of steam. In seconds, the bottom of the pot is crowded with searing meat. Another rim, a fast, efficient way to cook for thousands while keeping the meat intact. What looks like spectacle is actually precision born from long practice. The cook sprinkled generously, knowing exactly how much is needed to penetrate through rice, meat, and vegetables. As the meat begins to brown at the bottom of the pot, the onions soften and the carrots release their sugars, turning the oil golden. The base becomes fragrant, a mixture of sizzling fat and caramelized vegetables. And then, the chickpeas. These are poured in and arranged into mounds, almost like little hills, before being capped with giant lids. It's a clever technique. The steam trapped beneath the covers softens the chickpeas slowly without breaking them apart. Each ingredient is given its moment, treated with respect, so that when it finally comes together as plav, every bite carries its distinct texture and taste. Despite the massive scale, the philosophy of plav stays simple. Seasonings are few, but each plays a vital role. First comes salt, poured generously to ensure flavor reaches every layer of rice. Then cumin seeds, the spice most associated with Central Asian plav. They perfume the oil with an earthy, almost smoky aroma, cutting through the richness of the meat. Sometimes garlic bulbs are tucked in whole, sometimes dried fruits. Here it's raisins, scattered across the surface.
Large metal plates are set over the surface, creating a lid within the kazan itself. On top of these plates, the cooks place small chunks of sheeptail fat, known locally as dumba. The plates go in upside down, so as the fat softens and melts, it drips down through the layers, enriching everything from above. Once the fat has released its flavor, the plates are lifted out again, leaving behind a glistening with a deep, savory richness. Before the rice arrives, there's more steps. Another round of salt, spread wide across the surface, because a dish this size needs seasoning in layers. Finally, the raisins. They'll soften in the steam, adding just enough sweetness to balance the richness of the meat and oil. At first they look small and dry, but in the steam they swell, becoming plump and sweet, balancing the savory base with subtle bursts of sugar. And then, the moment everyone waits for. The rice. Sacks of it, hauled in and tipped straight into the kazan. Not fragile long-grain varieties, but a sturdy, short round rice grown in Central Asia. Each grain has a thick outer layer that holds its structure even under long cooking. That strength is vital here, where rice will boil and steam in oil, meat juices, and vegetables for hours without disintegrating. But adding rice isn't the end. Now comes the hardest part. Cooking rice evenly at this scale is a test of stamina and precision. Water must be added slowly, in stages, so the top doesn't steam too fast while the bottom burns.
The boiling stage is one of the most demanding parts of making plav on this scale. With thousands of kilos in one kazan, the rice never cooks evenly on its own. The bottom grains sit closest to the fire and absorb more heat, while the top risks steaming before it's fully boiled. That's why the chef has to constantly manage it, stirring with massive paddles, redistributing the layers, and watching every detail. Too long, and the rice collapses into a mushy paste. Too short, and it stays hard and raw. At this scale, one wrong call could spoil an entire pot. The responsibility rests entirely on the chef's instinct, and that's what makes this stage so critical. Cooks move constantly, redistributing heat across different zones of the kazan, dragging heavy paddles through hundreds of kilos of rice to make sure moisture reaches every corner. It's physical labor as much as culinary craft. Finally, when the grains have absorbed just enough liquid, the surface is leveled smooth and sealed under enormous metal plates. Dozens of them, laid edge to edge. The idea is simple. Trap the steam inside, finish the rice gently with its own heat. Under those covers, the rice transforms. Each grain separate, glossy with oil, carrying the flavors of meat, carrots, cumin, and raisins. What looks like chaos from above is, in fact, a perfectly controlled system. Tradition scaled up to feed thousands. The steaming finishes, and the real show begins. Helpers bring in wide platters, and the cooks start digging through the rice to reach the meat buried deep underneath. Those massive cuts, once heavy and solid, now fall apart as they're lifted out. Hours in the kazan have left them unbelievably tender. You don't need a knife, they almost collapse on their own. The cooks trim them into smaller pieces and lay them over heaping portions of rice. Each plate built like a small mountain. Golden grains glisten with oil, dotted with chickpeas, carrots, and raisins. Then the meat goes on top, rich and steaming. It's simple food, but when you see it served like this, you understand why people travel just to taste it. Plate after plate leaves the pot, carried out to waiting guests. The rice is fluffy, each grain separate. The meat glistens with flavor. In smaller kitchens, plav is a family dish shared on holidays and weddings. Here, it becomes something larger, a symbol of abundance, a living part of Uzbek hospitality.
Eating it connects you not just to this restaurant, but to a tradition that has stretched across centuries and borders. People travel from all over Uzbekistan and even from outside the country to witness this scale of cooking. 5,000 kilos of plav made in a single day. Not in festival season, not as a one-time event, but as part of daily life in this restaurant. Standing near the kazan, you can feel the heat radiating, hear the scrape of metal paddles against iron, and see how the cooks move in perfect rhythm. Each action practiced thousands of times before. The plates come out overflowing. Layers of rice, carrots, chickpeas, raisins, and those giant cuts of meat that have softened for hours beneath the grains. Plav in Uzbekistan has always been more than just food. It's served at weddings, holidays, and family gatherings, always symbolizing generosity and abundance. What you see here is that tradition scaled up to a level almost unimaginable, but still faithful to the same principles. Simple ingredients, careful balance, and a communal spirit. If you've never seen it before, add it to your list. Because once you stand in front of a kazan this size, and once you taste plav cooked in these proportions, you understand why it's not only the national dish of Uzbekistan, but a true cultural emblem across Central Asia. This restaurant earns over 200 million won every month. Its reputation comes not only from Korean barbecue, but also from inventive dishes you won't find in most places. Some you may never even have seen before. The kitchen offers an impressive range of dishes, some familiar, others so unusual that even seasoned diners may not have seen them before. Work begins in the morning with beef short ribs, the foundation of kalbi. Large raw cuts are trimmed, fat carefully separated but kept aside for later. The ribs are then sliced into long, thin strips, a butchery style known as LA galbi, developed by the Korean community in Los Angeles and brought back to Korea, where it became a beloved standard. Cutting through the bone exposes more surface area, allowing marinades to penetrate quickly and evenly. This style of preparation isn't just about efficiency. By controlling thickness and bone exposure, butchers ensure the meat cooks evenly over charcoal while staying tender inside. The trimmed fat, saved from earlier, will later be rendered and reused, a traditional practice in Korean kitchens that both avoids waste and deepens flavor. Once portioned, the ribs are vacuum-packed, preserving freshness until the grilling begins later in the day. While the meat rests, attention shifts to the broths and cooking oils that will flavor many dishes throughout the day. In one enormous pot, beef bones simmer for hours. As they bubble, marrow, gelatin, and collagen slowly dissolve into the water, giving the broth both depth of flavor and the silky body Koreans prize in soups. In another pot, the fat trimmed earlier from the short ribs is put to use. Heated gently at first, then over high heat, it melts down into liquid gold. This rendered beef fat, or tallow, has been part of Korean cooking for centuries. Unlike vegetable oils, it carries the natural aroma of the animal and withstands high heat without breaking down, making it ideal for frying or enriching sauces. To build even more complexity, chopped onions and leeks are stirred directly into the hot fat. They soften, caramelize at the edges, and release natural sugars, layering sweetness over the savory richness. Once strained, what remains is a dark, intensely fragrant oil. Into a massive mixing bowl go handfuls of Korean chili flakes, their bright red color a signature of Korean cooking. Minced garlic follows, raw and sharp, then vinegar for acidity. Finally, the deep smoky beef fat oil prepared earlier is poured in, turning the mixture glossy and rich. Each ingredient plays a role. Chili provides heat, garlic layers depth, vinegar cuts through heaviness, and fat gives body and staying power. The paste is intensely versatile, brushed onto meats before grilling, stirred into soups for depth, or folded into sauces where it acts as both seasoning and thickener. Meanwhile, onions are diced and cooked in generous amounts of butter until glassy and tender. The next step is grinding beef with reserved fat, creating the right balance between lean meat and richness. Into this minced mixture goes the seasoning base, the chili paste, sautéed onions, garlic, sugar, egg yolks, whole milk, and breadcrumbs. Each ingredient plays a role. Yolks add richness. Milk tenderizes. Sugar balances heat. And breadcrumbs hold moisture. Thorough kneading ensures the mixture is consistent, neither too dense nor too loose. It's then shaped into large, uniform meatballs. Size matters here. Each piece must cook evenly while still holding juiciness at the center. These meatballs, though not part of traditional barbecue, have become one of the restaurant's most popular specialties. Meanwhile, the bone broth continues simmering. After several hours, the bones are removed, leaving a collagen-rich stock. Into this go cabbage, chunks of beef, and ladles of the spice paste, transforming the clear broth into a deep, spicy soup. At the same time, another marinade is being prepared, this one for galbi. Korean pears are peeled and pureed, then blended with soy sauce, garlic, sugar, and syrup. Pears are a traditional choice in Korean barbecue marinades, their natural enzymes gently breaking down protein fibers to make the meat more tender. Their sweetness balances the salt of soy sauce and the bite of garlic, creating the unique flavor that defines galbi across Korea. In another corner of the kitchen, beef bones filled with marrow are stacked neatly in towering steamers. The gentle heat coaxes the marrow into a soft, almost custard-like texture, preserving its richness without letting it melt away. Later, each piece will be seared with a blowtorch, caramelizing the surface to create both flavor and contrast in texture, before being served in a ramen-style soup. This dish bridges culinary worlds. Marrow, long prized in European kitchens, reinterpreted through the lens of Korean broth making, where depth and body are everything. Meanwhile, trays of fresh crabs are coated in a vivid red chili paste, transforming them into yangnyeomgaejang, one of Korea's most celebrated raw seafood preparations. The crabs marinate slowly, their flesh absorbing spice, sweetness, and umami from the sauce, while keeping the delicate tenderness that makes the dish so distinctive. At the same time, the galbi short ribs prepared earlier are brought from storage. Long strips of beef are bathed in a fruit-based marinade of Korean pears, soy, garlic, and syrup, a combination that tenderizes while layering sweetness into the meat. By the time they reach the charcoal grill, every strand of muscle will be infused with flavor, ready for the intense heat of barbecue. The marrow bones are finished with the flame of a blowtorch. The direct fire caramelizes the surface, adding a smoky crust that contrasts with the velvety richness inside. Served by the spoonful in bowls of beef broth, the marrow becomes the centerpiece of a ramen that is both hearty and refined. A fusion of French marrow tradition with Korean soup culture, where broth is prized for its depth. On the grill, the oversized meatballs are cooked until their surfaces form a crackling crust over the open flame. Each one carries the layered flavors of beef, fat, garlic, and spices, bound together with milk and yolk. Some are crowned with a bright sunny side-up egg, the yolk spilling into the meat below. Others are draped with slices of cheese that melt slowly over the top, turning what might seem rustic into something indulgent and luxurious. At the same time, the bone broth that simmered for hours is brought to a roaring boil. Vegetables and spices enrich it further, and it's finished with fresh garnishes just before serving. Timing is crucial. Soups, marrow, meatballs, and barbecue are prepared in unison, each dish leaving the kitchen at its peak.
Now the heart of the restaurant, Korean barbecue. The marinated galbi slices are laid across charcoal grills built into the dining tables. Flames lick at the edges as the meat sizzles, its marinade caramelizing into a glossy crust. In true Korean fashion, the meat is flipped once, cooked until both sides are browned, then cut with scissors into bite-sized pieces. This method is more than convenience. It ensures every piece is tender and easy to eat with chopsticks. Another round of beef is placed on the grill and brushed with additional marinade, layering flavor upon flavor. The combination of smoke, sweetness, and char is what makes galbi unforgettable. One after another, dishes reach the tables. Galbi still sizzling, meatballs smothered in gravy, bowls of broth fragrant with cabbage and beef, and bone marrow ramen finished with its smoky crust. It's a full showcase of what this restaurant does best, taking the foundations of Korean cuisine and expanding them with creativity. Would you try these dishes yourself? And, if given the chance, would you come here to experience them in person? This shop has built its reputation over decades, known for bringing authentic American-style donuts to Korea. The day begins with the basics: flour, yeast, milk, and water. These are combined in a large mixer until the dough reaches a soft, elastic consistency. Yeast is essential here. As it feeds on sugar in the flour, it releases carbon dioxide, creating the airy structure that makes donuts so light. Once the dough is ready, it's lifted from the machine and portioned by hand. Each piece is kneaded again, this time more gently, to incorporate air pockets that will expand during frying. The pieces are then covered and left to rest, a stage where fermentation allows the dough to soften and develop flavor. This waiting time is crucial. Without it, the donuts would fry up heavy and dense rather than fluffy. Shaping begins. The baker takes the rested dough and presses it gently into flat rounds, careful not to lose the tiny air pockets formed during fermentation. Instead of the classic ring cutter, he uses a solid cutter with no hole. These are destined to become filled donuts, soft, plump rounds that will later hold custards, creams, or fruit jams. Leaving out the center hole isn't just for looks. It gives the donut more space inside, allowing a generous filling and a tender bite. Traditionally, the hole was used to help the dough cook evenly in hot oil, but with modern frying control, solid donuts are perfectly manageable. The next trays reveal the variety that defines this bakery's output. Classic ring-shaped donuts are cut, and the small centerpieces, far from waste, are fried separately into bite-sized rounds, often eaten as quick snacks. Alongside them, long rectangular pieces are shaped, destined to be split later and filled with creams or savory spreads, giving them a versatility that plain rings don't have. Another tray holds twisted donuts, made by rolling 2 strands of dough and spiraling them together. This shape has a practical benefit. The uneven surface creates more crust during frying, giving a crunchier exterior while the inside stays soft. From the same dough, a different path. Portions are set aside to become apple pies, showing how versatile donut dough can be. One batch is mixed with chopped fresh apples, apple puree, and even chunks of raw dough. This blend forms the base for apple donut cookies. Part pastry, part fritter. The apple adds natural sweetness and moisture, while the dough chunks inside ensure each bite has a chewy, satisfying texture. In Korea, this style is especially popular with younger customers who love the rich fillings and the sense of getting more dessert in every bite. The first donuts are lowered into shimmering oil, frying until their surface turns an even golden brown. As they're lifted out, still hot and crisp, a thick sugar glaze is poured generously over the tops. The heat helps the glaze seep into every crevice, coating the donuts with a glossy sheen and adding a layer of sweetness that balances the tart apple inside. Cinnamon roll donuts are prepared differently from the others. Instead of shaping one uniform dough sheet, smaller chunks of dough are kneaded together only lightly, leaving plenty of air pockets inside. This creates a looser, more open structure once fried. The pieces are then rolled into long strips, coated with cinnamon sugar, and spiraled into coils. In the hot oil, the trapped air expands, puffing the layers apart and giving the donut a pastry-like texture. When still warm, a sugar glaze is brushed over the surface, seeping into the folds and amplifying the spice. The result is light, fragrant, and layered. The warmth of a cinnamon roll, but with the delicate crispness of a donut. The round donuts are next to fry, their smooth surfaces turning golden in the oil. After cooling just enough, each one is piped full of rich fillings, custards, fruit jams, or whipped creams. Filled donuts have a different appeal than ring donuts. The absence of a hole gives them more space inside to hold fillings without bursting. Among the most popular here is a version coated in glossy chocolate, sprinkled with crunchy nougat pieces, and finished with toasted marshmallows. It's inspired by the American campfire treat, the s'more, but translated into donut form. The contrast is striking. A crisp shell of glaze, soft and rich dough beneath, and a sweet molten center. It shows how filled donuts are not just a canvas for tradition, but also for playful, modern flavors that catch the eye of younger customers. Next come the rectangular donuts. Once fried, they're torn open by hand, the rough edges helping them hold fillings. A rich, whipped chocolate hazelnut cream is spooned inside, turning each donut into a soft, messy dessert bar. More trays fill up with variety. Shiny glazed rings stacked neatly, twisted spirals waiting to be fried, and the small, bite-sized holes that many children favor as snacks. Donuts in Korea trace back to the late 20th century, when American chains introduced ring-shaped fried dough to the market. But the idea of fried bread was already familiar. Korea has long had its own versions, the most famous being kakwabaegi, twisted strands of yeasted dough rolled in sugar. Unlike American-style donuts, kakwabaegi are chewy and less sweet, often eaten warm on the street. Modern Korean donut shops, like this one, merge the two traditions.
They adopt the large-scale production and creativity of American bakeries, experimenting with fillings and toppings, while still appealing to local tastes that value texture, soft inside, slightly chewy outside. The popularity of bite-sized pieces also reflects Korean eating culture, where sharing and snacking are central. So, when you see these trays, you're looking at more than just donuts. They represent a hybrid, global influence meeting local tradition, fried dough becoming not only a dessert, but a cultural bridge. Here, creativity feels endless. Once the donuts cool, they become canvases for decoration. Some are dipped in pastel-colored glazes and scattered with bright pink sprinkles, catching the eye before the first bite. Others go in the opposite direction. Unusual toppings like caramelized bacon, hazelnut crunch, or even roasted nuts for a savory, sweet balance. Fillings also vary widely. Airy whipped cream, rich custards, chocolate ganache, fruit jams, or seasonal flavors like sweet potato and matcha, which reflect local tastes. Each option highlights how adaptable fried dough can be. Around the world, donut culture thrives because of this flexibility. One base dough that can transform into endless variations. Each form reacts differently in hot oil. Rings puff evenly, rectangles fry with contrasting textures between crust and crumb, and twists give a chewier, almost bread-like bite. By preparing multiple shapes at once, the bakery appeals to a wide range of preferences, ensuring every customer finds a texture they enjoy. Would you try these? Imagine taking a bite. A crisp, golden shell giving way to a pillowy interior. Sugar and spice meeting molten chocolate. Or a tart fruit jam that snaps against a chewy center. These donuts are designed to surprise. If you like bold flavors and bakery theatrics, this is the kind of place worth making a trip for. So, would you come and try one?